As we settle in, would you please refer to the purple sheets on your seats, and we're going to sing a couple hymns, because that's one of the things I remember very dearly about Bob, was our hymn singing before our time worship every Sunday morning. And we're starting with Bob and Gilead.
Since I first Good morning. My name is Barbara Esther, and I want to welcome all of you as we gather at the Weaverville Community Center for a Quaker celebration of life. The life of Robert Gerald Smith, who most of us called Bob, who was a beloved member of Asheville Friends Meeting and the Religious Society of Friends since 1983. A memorial in the Manor of Friends is a meeting for worship with a special purpose of honoring and remembering with joy the life of a person. We begin by settling into a period of silent worship, followed by sharing about Bob. When you stand to speak, please wait for someone to bring a microphone, as I just modeled, because we have people joining us on Zoom and because we are recording this. Just wait to speak until someone takes you the microphone. Between sharings, we usually leave a short interval of reflection on what has been said. The sharing can take many different forms, such as memories, song, or anecdotes about Bob. And those who hold the silence also contribute to the service of remembrance. When the sharing seems to be complete, I will ask whether anyone else wants to share before I reach out to Donna to signal the close of meeting. Usually that's about an hour. But we wait for a sense of completion of our celebration of a life more than for the chime of a clock. When I reach out, instead of traditional handshake, some friends may want to greet those seated nearby with another gesture, such as a nod or a signal of greeting. We want to be particularly careful as we greet Donna to refrain from hugs at this time, perhaps. Immediately following our worship, a lunch will be held following that hour, and we hope that you will stick around and there will be time to talk and remember more about Bob.
When I first met Bob, I absolutely despised him. I had just moved to Asheville, and I was teaching at the Children's Grammar School, which is a parent cooperative school, and the kids were wide open. I mean, they were wild. And I would just get them settled, and Bob, who worked across the hall, would pop his head in the door and say, "Hey, you turkeys," and get them going. I despised him. When he asked me out for a date, I went with him, but with the purpose of not accepting in the future. I wanted him to know that I didn't not accept him because he was black. And so I went out with him. We had a lovely time. And then that summer, I had a ovarian cyst, and I had to have an ovary removed. You guys, you came from my right ovary. Just in case you wanted to know. That summer, I was destitute. I was so impoverished, and I had not a penny to my name. And one morning, an envelope slipped under my apartment door, and I opened it up, and there was $200, which was a fortune back in those days. And I looked out the window to see who had given it to me, and there I saw Bob walking away. He didn't mention that he gave it to me. He did it in silence, and it was beautiful. And I thought, well, maybe there's more to this guy than I thought in the beginning. And there was. He was the most compassionate and kind and selfless human being I've ever known. And I'm blessed to have been his wife for 46 years. And his loss is just immeasurable. I thank you all for being here and for showing your support. Thank you.
Don, I'm glad to hear that story. Hey, you all. I'm so glad to see so many people here that love Bob and the family. I'm Jacqueline Hallam, and I met Bob in 1979. And at the Buncombe County Community Relations Council, along with so many hundreds of other people, with Margaret and Phyllis and who else? The people, Gail and Kay. And I was on the education committee. And most people who knew me then, based on Bob's name for me, was Miss Hoodlum. Miss Hoodlum. And so that's the only name I ever used in that setting. And I appreciate it now more than ever fondly. And so my job during the Big Pig Out in the fall, and probably, how many came to the Big Pig Out? At Community Relations Council, of course. You, of course. And so my job was to bring the strawberry poke cake. And if I didn't bring the poke cake, I couldn't come. But it warms my heart to be here and see so many people and to see Bob smile sitting right over there. Two of them. Just like that smile. And it scared me a little bit when I saw you, David, walking in. I was like, oh my God. I mean, I saw you kind of walking up that way, and it kind of freaked me just a smidgen. Just a little bit. But Bob was amazing, loving, kind, had a sacred spirit, and he made, if there was things going on in the community, which there always were, otherwise he wouldn't have had that job, but he could soothe the room like no other. He just kind of stand up in his little humble way, and things might have been getting a little out of hand, and he really didn't say anything. He just stood up. And they was like, well, it's too nice. Bob's too nice for us to talk like that. And so he could just stand and bring the room to peace. And so I won't forget Bob, the family, and so many of the good times. So many people have left us even before Bob, our good friends, where we sat around and did a lot of fun things together. So I'm glad that I could be here today, and I'm glad that you had this gathering so that we could show you how much that we loved him and love you. Thank you.
I first met the Smith family when Christopher was in kindergarten. I remember when Donna brought him to the bus. Oh. And then I had the privilege of working for Bob at the Community Relations Council, and that was a wonderful job. We had every morning we would sit at around the table and read the paper. I would do the crossword puzzle. But I have a couple favorite memories of Bob. One was when Bob and I went on an investigation for a woman who had been a victim of housing discrimination. And she had me sit in a chair, and she had Bob sit on her bed. I can still see the look of uncomfort on Bob's face. I will never forget that. And as we were leaving, Bob found a cross in a mud puddle. It was on a necklace, and he gave it to me and said, don't say I never gave you anything. Another time was when Prince Charles came to town, and Kay and I were just enamored watching him on TV and thought it was wonderful. Bob was standing behind us saying, "Do you have a job? What is your job?" And of course that made me laugh, but there were so many memories of that job and so many memories of taking care of Chris. And David was a lifeguard at the JCC and Donna, and I just love this family.
Up close? Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm falling over. I'm Jane Hatley. I've known Donna and Bob since we together as parents helped to start the wonderful Francine Delaney New School for Children. All those folks are here today. And didn't really get to know Bob that well, even though we were on the board together at some point. I really got to know Donna at that time, but got to know Bob when he was on the board of Self-Help Credit Union. And I became director, and I was terrified. And Bob came to me and he said that he was going to have to step down from the board. It was time. He was, he had other things he needed to do, and I panicked. And I said, "Bob, please don't do this." Because he had been such a help to me when I was just learning the job and being, coming to board meetings and listening to him. And he said, "Jane, if I had any worry about this, I wouldn't be leaving. You've got it." And it just having his blessing meant a huge amount to me in moving forward. And I love the family. Chris and Lizzie were in the same class together, and she sends you her love. And anyway, and I love Donna and always will. So thank you. And I'm so glad we're all here to show support.
Hi. Hi. Hi, my name is Shuli. I'm a nurse at Mission Hospital. Some of you might know me from my previous work, which was in higher education. I see you over there, Deb. So earlier this year, I had a new patient named Bob. Stop. And I said, I know that name. I met him. I met the family. I got to take care of him. Nurses pick favorites, and don't let people tell you otherwise. He quickly became one of my favorites. I spent a lot of time with him alone, and we talked about how humbling it is to be in the hospital and to be at the mercy of the staff. So I learned he liked basketball, and we had a nurse on the floor who used to play professionally, so I staged this grand gesture of them meeting each other. And then one day I had to take a day off, so Kat was his nurse. I came back the next day, and he said, Kat was wonderful, but she's not you. So on my last day of taking care of him, I mentioned that I used to work at Warren Wilson and that I'm Jewish. And he said, "Oh, wait, do you know?" And I had this moment of like, oh, here we go. Not all Jewish people know each other. And he said, "Do you know Deb Miles?" And I turned to him, and pardon my language, I said, "No shit. You are Bob Smith." And he said, "Yes, you know my name. You've been my nurse for 2 weeks." And I said, "No, you are the Bob Smith." Because in my previous career, I worked with Deb, and I did community engagement. I worked with building bridges and lots of community organizations. So I started running up and down the halls. There are all these travel nurses. They're not from here. And I said, "There's a legend. It's 66. It's Bob Smith." And they're like, "What?" I'm like getting my phone out. I'm like, "Look, it's Bob Smith." And they're all like, "We're from Tennessee. We don't know anything." So that day I was going on vacation, so I knew I wouldn't see him. And we hugged, and he teared up, and he said, "You are a magical light." And it just melted me because, first of all, nurses don't get told that very often. Usually we're told to wipe people's asses and whatever. And so we just held each other's hands. We both got emotional. And then that was it. And I said, I don't know if y'all remember, I said, "I'm going to see you again. I know I'm going to see you again because I work on the renal floor. So I see people over and over. I get attached. I see them again. They come down the hall, and I'm like, 'Woo, you're back.' look, I mean, I'm sorry you're here, but I'm so happy to see you. And so since I become a nurse, I read obituaries. It's kind of an obsession of mine. It's a little dark. My family hates it. And so I read in late June, July, and there he was. It was like 8 o'clock at night. I was working the next day. I ran into my house and I was just sobbing because I knew I was going to see him again. I knew it. And seeing that just broke me. And then I started my internet stalking, and I found you online. And I just want you to know, I told the floor, and everybody remembers him and wants me to send my heartfelt condolences. I even was texting with Kat, the basketball player, this morning, and she just wanted me to send y'all her thoughts. It was an honor. It was an honor to be with you. I know that Bob's sister is here. It's an honor to know your family, and a strange kind of full circle moment for me. So thank you, and thank you, Bob.
Good morning. My name is Bob Patrick, and I had the pleasure of meeting Bob in 1966. We both attended Asheville Catholic High School. We played basketball and soccer for 4 years. I never had the pleasure of meeting his boys. I just wanted to be here today. Excuse me. Just to be a part of this celebration. We had a lot of fun. A lot of laughs. And I just wanted to tell the family just how much I thought of him. It's obvious that he had an impact in his community. And he will be well missed. Thank you.
Thank you. I certainly didn't know Bob as long as some of you in the room. I met him a few decades ago working together with the Community Relations Council. What I wanted to lift up is not only that I learned a lot from him about community work and being proactive to prevent challenges in the community by developing relationships and being with others, but I also learned about parenting from him. He was amazing at being present with me about all the things that were going on in my life. And at the time I was a single mom of a son who was entering high school and was having some challenges. And Bob said, well, you go to the high school and you get in and talk to his teachers and his counselors. And I'm like, well, he doesn't want me to. He says, that doesn't matter. He said, I show up for my boys and you're going to do the same thing. And it made all the difference in the world. And my son remembers Bob very fondly. He managed to be present with whatever was real in the moment, whether it was little issues or big issues. And I'm grateful to him for his mentorship in all the different ways that he mentored me.
My dad, wow. I was loved. We were loved. Our house was loved. I had a great good fortune during the pandemic to get a commission by a theater home of mine, Soho Rep, and I could do whatever I wanted, just as long as there was something came out of it. And it was such a gift because I had nothing to do. And I needed somewhere to focus it's hard when you're a theater worker and there's no theater to work at. So it was a challenging time for me. And I thought, like, what do I do? What do I make? And home kept coming back to me. I missed home. I missed my parents. I missed not being able to be home. And as a lot of you know, my parents lived at 193 Tacoma Circle for 46 years. So it was I'll be 46 in August. So it's the only house really I ever knew. And very much my parents' story, my father's story is very connected to that physical place and will always be. So I took this commission and I read Look Homeward Angel, which is a beautiful but also really complicated racist, it's got a lot of stuff going on there that I didn't really realize. You just kind of, so that was complicated, and I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to work on so much. But then I thought, well, let's talk to Mom and Dad and find out what this home is. So I did a series of interviews with both my parents, Zoom interviews, and I'm so grateful that I have those recordings of my dad now. But I don't know, I looked at what he said, and this is one of the last things I put in this piece I created, but these are his words. I asked him what home was. Home is where my sweetie lamb is, my honey lamb. Wherever she is home. And you don't need much else. Familiar things. I can walk around the house in the dark and know where I am, within reason. I won't bump into stuff. I hear the noises. I know the creaks when your mom's coming downstairs. There's a certain steps she steps on all the time. I can always hear it. I always know where she is. She likes to have a fan on all the time, even in the winter time, because the noise, she loves it. You got that from your mom. That kind of thing. I would love not having a telephone. But you can't get away from that. It's okay. That's what Dad said. But other than that, home is where she is. And she's made this her nest. And it's just us. Just two aging, rolling around, still a lot of love. And we're downsizing all the time. We're trying to get rid of stuff so it won't be so much on you guys when we're gone. Why'd you keep all this crap? And so, but that's it. Pictures and memories, everything we remember, everything means something, You touch something, you almost come up with a picture, That's home. That's home.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wanda, and I'm just a fairly new resident of WNC. We lived in Greensboro, my husband and I, for almost 35 years. And I don't know the Smith family, but I knew Mr. Bob through my son Ryan. And excuse me if I get emotional. Our family, Ryan has severe autism. And we weren't used to people reaching out, loving on him. He came to Blue West and he met Bob. And Bob was an answer to my prayer because I wanted somebody like that to reach out to my son. And Bob was that answer. And my family loved him. Ryan loved him. He saw the best in Ryan. I didn't know Bob very well, but Ryan did. And if Ryan could be here today, and if he could talk to you, he would say, Bob was my best friend. And I know he was. I just wish in this world that we're living in that there were a million more Bobs, because the world would be a different place. Thank you, Bob.
My name is Monroe Gilmore, and I want to thank you for that anecdote. I think Bob did that everywhere he went with all of us, and I was privileged to know him for over 35 years, and we both worked on many issues in the community. At times, we were co-conspirators. He was always an ally, whatever the issue, and a counselor. As everybody in here knows, if you went to Bob, you were going to get good, solid counsel and advice on what to do. And one thing you could feel through Bob is that Donna and Chris and David, they were his rock. And that was a beautiful thing to realize his strength was coming out of that family. And anyway, I just want to commemorate Bob and just say how much I loved him and loved working with him, and really admire the impact he had on all of us and on our community.
Hi, I'm Maureen Barchuk, and I'm kind of an imposter because I only knew Bob a few months. I knocked on the door with snickerdoodles and said, "Welcome." And I saw that smile. And I saw that smile the last time I saw him too. And that will always stay in my heart.
Good morning. My name is Tabby. I am standing on the shoulders of Bob. Bob welcomed me in Asheville 40 years ago. I came to Asheville as a refugee, but guess who protected me is the hero, the warrior Bob. So I'm thankful. My kids and Chris and they grew together. And they encouraged me to say, "Mom, go, because it's important." And Bob looked for me. I happened to call a neighbor when Bob was gonna go, I think 3 days later, saying, "Have you seen Bob?" Because I hadn't seen him for quite some time. So you will allow me to sing a song in Debelia to eulogize Bob. Hamba kahle mhlobo wethu, hamba kahle mhlobo wethu, hamba kahle mhlobo wethu, hamba kahle mhlobo wethu, hamba kahle. Sochale tu sobonana kwelizayo, sobonana kwelizayo, sobonana kwelizayo, hamba kahle mhlobo wethu, hamba kahle mhlobo wethu. Go well, my brother. Sleep well, my brother. We shall see you next time. Thank you so much for allowing me.
My name's Chris Walters, Asheville Catholic High, class of 1968, and I knew Bob from those days, and also Donna from her days of her teaching at the Children's Grammar School. So I'm here to just be a witness to Bob and Donna and commemorate their contributions and lives. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Libby, and I had the gift of being Christopher's assistant teacher in 3rd grade. And that is when I met Bob. Life has had many twists and turns for me. I've been in many different places, but God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, always knew where to place Bob when I was having a difficult time. Because he would always encourage me. He would always tell me how proud he was of the work that I was doing. And he just had this way of making things right. If he would walk into a space where I had to do some work, I could make eye contact and I immediately felt better. Because he always had words of wisdom and truth. And to the family, I am so sorry for your loss, and I thank you for the gift that you gave us with Bob.
Hi, my name is Allie Essner, and I wish I had known Bob better, but I know his son Chris very, very well. He's been one of my dear friends since we went to Notre Dame together. And Chris and David both have so many wonderful qualities from Bob and Donna, but one of the best things about Chris is that he can always make you laugh. He's just one of the funniest people I know. And when I met Bob and got to spend time with him, one of the first things I noticed is that he can make anyone laugh. He just was really funny. But he also had a lot of wisdom, and I think that that combination of humor and wisdom just was really a gift to him and to everyone he knew. And I know it lives on in Chris and David today. So I'm blessed to know both of them, and I think everyone here is better for knowing Bob. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Buffy Fowler. And I got to know Bob in 1996 when we started to open our school. Him and Donna were founding parents. And through the years, Bob has always been a part of the school and continued to, his presence continued to grace us in different ways. He would either be on the board or he would show up out of the blue with a box of donuts and coffee and just appear and then suddenly disappear and just leave the smiles and the love behind. But the thing that I always remember about Bob the most is whether it was a good situation or a tense situation. The words that came out of his mouth were so wise and helped me grow as a person to where Bob will always live on and his words will live on. I think everybody here can attest to how wise he was. And it's so cool to see Chris and David through everything that you're doing for Bob to live on. And Donna, we love you. And I just know everybody here loves Bob. It's just hard to get out everything we want to say.
It is so wonderful to see everybody here to commemorate Bob Smith. I worked with Bob at Community Relations Council for almost 26 years. And we had a wonderful time, and I learned so much from him. As old as I am, you would think I wouldn't have to learn anything from anybody. But I learned so much from Bob, and he was so wonderful to work with. He solved problems before they became problems. He was a man of intelligence. He was a man of courtesy. He was a man that knew how to handle situations. And I learned that from him. And I trusted him. It's not nowadays that you can find many people that you can trust. But Bob Smith was one that could be trusted. He did the right thing because he always said, any time is the right time to do the right thing. And I learned that from him, and I'm still living by that motto today, because any time is the right time. And I feel blessed that Bob was a part of my life as well as I was a part of his. Donna and David and other son, Chris. I'm so sorry for your loss, but it's not a loss. It was a blessing.
Hi, I'm Rylan Hansen, and I'm a member of Asheville Friends Meeting. And that's where I met Bob for the first time. And I started attending there in 2006 and became a member in 2007. And I'm autistic, and the life circumstances forced me to move into Battery Park Apartments in 2009. And I was not prepared for that. I remembered before I moved there, I used to be like, I'd be in the car with my friend Bobby, and I looked at that building and I said, I'd rather die than live in that place. And I moved in there, and the first apartment they put me in had a southern exposure. And at that time, the heat HVAC system, it's building wide, and it was on air conditioning starting May the 1st, no matter what the weather was before May the 1st. And so it's like March, and I couldn't turn on AC, but my room was getting so hot, and then I was also getting sick because of the carpeting, because I'm sensitive to VOCs, and I filed for this reasonable accommodation, and dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, but the manager of the building at that time, she was a former prison guard, and she treated most of us like we were prisoners. And you know, when I'm stressed, I go into shutdown mode, and when people bully me, I just kind of curl up inside myself, and I couldn't handle even speaking to her, and she was giving me so much grief about this reasonable accommodation request. And so she, you know, it's just like, you know, well, we'll move you, but you can't have this and you can't have that. And I contacted adult, you know, through Medicaid, there's like social services that I could get, but they said that it would take 2 months just to get me with a social services worker. So, you know, I knew Bob mainly as, I didn't know him well then, I knew him mainly as the man who stood up and told us what, you know, the things that had happened, and he would always say, well, I've been studying on this, and you know, I always loved that when he said that, and I knew that anytime he was telling, that he stood up to tell us a story, that he would have something to say that would you know, really make you think. And but anyway, I went to him and I asked him, I said, could you come in and be my advocate? And he came in there and he's just, you know, in his very quiet way, and it was just kind of like, she was like a balloon and that somebody stuck a pin in, you know. It was just like she couldn't deal with his quiet authority. And so she was just like, she just backed down, and she gave me what I needed, and that was thanks to Bob. So, you know, years after that, you know, over the years after that, he would always ask me, well, you know, how are things going over there? And, you know, he was always somebody that, you know, I felt really cared, you know, and I could talk to him about things in a way that I couldn't talk to other people about them. So, anyway, thanks for listening, and Bob, thanks for being my friend.
So just before I share what I'd like to share, I just want to thank so many people for coming. My childhood best friends, Drew Baker and Geneva, are here. What a blessing. My kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and sixth grade teachers are all here, which is really nice to see. Fellow Catholic parishioners from St. Lawrence are here, which is such a blessing as well. I want to single out in a special way all the people who look like me. They're not incognito. My brother Jesuits. My superior, Father Greg Chisholm, came all the way from Baltimore to be here today. My brother, Father Brendan Coffey, drove over from Charlotte, and my best friend in the Society of Jesus, Mr. Jake Braithwaite, traveled internationally just to be here for today with us here. Lastly, I want to acknowledge my best friend, Dr. Alexandra Elsa Paharic. She flew into Charlotte and got in at 12:30 this morning, and she drove into Asheville this morning. She's the mother of 2 little tiny kids, and she works full-time as a microbiologist, and she's pregnant with a third. And she did all that to be here today. So I want to thank you all for surrounding us in love. No, I wasn't a good Quaker. That's why I became Catholic. So I came prepared. So there's one line of scripture which I believe summarizes beautifully exactly who my dad was. It's found in the 3rd verse of the 2nd chapter of the letter of Paul to the Philippians. It reads, "And over all these put on love, that is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of Christ control your hearts, the peace into which you were called in one body, and be thankful." This was the spiritual refrain of his life. My father was born to a single mother and grew up in poverty. He, his mother, and 4 siblings lived with his grandparents in a small house on the south side because money was tight. My grandmother, Dad's hero and role model, worked her entire life in grueling factory jobs, but never even made $10,000 in a year. From the start, the deck was stacked against my father. As he grew up, he faced so much adversity and so many challenges in his life. Yet through them all, he not only survived, but he overcame. He not only overcame, but he conquered. And most important, he not only conquered, but he triumphed. He allowed all those experiences to stretch his heart rather than crush it, to become more compassionate because of it rather than bitter. And over all these things, put on love. That is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of Christ control your hearts, the peace into which you were called in one body. And be thankful. Allow me to provide just a short list of triumphs. At age 6 or 7, his house caught on fire. He rescued his little brother and himself, waking him up in the middle of the night, showing him the way to the window where they both jumped off their second-story roof to survive. At 8 or 9, on his morning walk to school with his elder sister, he was run over by a car. Knocked into a coma for weeks, it was initially uncertain if he would make it, or if he made it, whether he would be handicapped for life. After a few weeks, he woke up and painstakingly learned how to walk, talk, read, and write again. At 18, he was the first in his family to go to college. It was his first time living anywhere but home, and he had no support. Yet he worked constantly and struggled mightily, paying his way through and graduating on time. Not once, but twice during his long career with the Community Relations Council, Dad narrowly missed connecting flights which crashed. ValueJet 592 in the Everglades and Comair 3272 into a field in Michigan that killed all on board, twice. Most obstacles in his life he overcame by his sheer grit and goodness, but he was also lucky. God's hand was upon him, which is fortunate for me, because if it weren't, I wouldn't be here. At age 26, he married my mother, the love of his life. Just 10 years after Loving versus Virginia forced North Carolina to legalize interracial marriage. They both went through hell for their love for each other. Yet they not only survived, they overcame. They conquered. They triumphed. And their love was a source of love, the household in which David and I grew up. Soon after I came along, my father lost his mother, who was his rock. She was wonderful, she was hardworking, generous, beautiful, and she gave him the education that let him become a success. But she also grew up in a house with trauma, and she didn't ever express love. She never said, "I love you" to him. He never really knew if he was loved. But as a result, when my brother and then I came around, our father constantly told us that he loved us. Every conversation ended with, "I love you." He wanted us to know, and he wanted to be sure to give us what he had never received. And over all these things, put on love. That is the bond of perfection. And he didn't just say it. As St. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, once wrote, "Love ought to manifest itself in deeds more than in words." Bob backed up his refrain of loving words with loving deeds. When I was 7, my PE teacher, I'm surprised that he's not here, no. My PE teacher called home to express some concerns about my coordination. Difficult to imagine, I'm sure. I was terrible at both catching and throwing. I still am. But every day, Dad would throw the baseball or the kickball or the frisbee or the football with me out in the street. I hated PE because I was awful at it, but Dad made it fun. "Get it in the breadbasket" was his mantra. I never knew exactly what that meant. I still don't. But I know that his love turned an embarrassing experience of exclusion into joy. When Dad went to Washington, D.C. on business when I was 5 or 6, he asked me what souvenir I'd like. I said, "A train whistle." Apparently, I've always been weird. Determined, Dad told me that he would look, and Dad was a man of his word. On his last day there, the only time he had a free moment, he went out to search. Almost immediately, his wallet was pickpocketed, yet he continued. Then unexpectedly, out of nowhere, it began to downpour. He was soaked. He had no umbrella, and because he was black, not a single cab stopped to pick him up, although dozens passed him by. Still, he was undeterred. He walked and walked around downtown DC and stopped in every tourist store, including one in which he was accused of theft and was shamed by the shopkeeper. He had an energy that was unmutable. After all of that he went through, when he got home, he apologized to me profusely. I may have never gotten the whistle, but I got something much more valuable, the honor of being his son. My father was hurt deeply by the actions of the Catholic Church during desegregation. The very church that would become my own, and some of the very people who were there when I converted, ignored, maligned, and actively excluded him when his own church was closed. Yet, when I, at age 11, decided that I was going to become a Catholic, he let me. He was there with me at Mass at every important event of my life. The night I converted, the night my mother converted, my graduation. He even went to Mass with me the morning that I left to join the novitiate and become a Jesuit. 2 years later, he was at my first vows, and he beamed with pride. Over all these, put on love. That is the bond of perfection. As he got older and weaker after strokes and spinal stenosis, he couldn't feel his hands or walk with ease, yet he never complained. As long as he was able, well into my 30s, whenever I would come home, he insisted upon painstakingly carrying my hamper of laundry step by step down to the basement to wash, dry, and fold for me. As things got worse, through it all, he was sunny and funny, patient and noble. There are so many things I can say about him, but I'm also wary of making him out to be a plaster saint like he would make fun of in a Catholic gift shop. Dad was so human and so alive and so strange. He loved Nintendo 64, and when we would play Mario Kart, he was always Toad. He loved the UNCA women's basketball team, the Lady Bulldogs, and he came out rain or shine for them, shouting directions, encouragement, and rebukes at them for the entire game. It was very embarrassing. A man of impeccable character, but of sometimes questionable taste, he loved pink garden flamingos, including his 2 Joes, and green cars. Besides Mom, the other love of his life was Bessie, a 1987 Chevrolet Celebrity, complete with fuzzy dice, which hung from the rearview mirror, and 2 bobblehead dogs on the dash, Mrs. Louise Pettibottom and Pierre Rust-Oleum. Yes, of course they had names. He named everything. Dad drove that car until it literally caught on fire in 2013. We honestly didn't know if he was going to be okay without it. Besides his love for Motown, for some reason, Dad loved Nelly Furtado, and he also loved late-night radio host Delilah. By chance the other night, I listened to the radio as I was driving home, and I heard her silky voice for the first time in decades. I had to pull over. I couldn't believe that I would never hear him say, "I love you, Delilah," again. What a marvel grief is, to pine after something so desperately that used to cause me such embarrassment. I would give anything to be back with him again. Dad always willfully mispronounced ketchup as catsup, and he thought that all dogs were hilarious. He didn't know the name of half the people that he greeted in our neighborhood, but he knew the name of every single dog there. He got to everything 30 minutes early and always parked miles away from wherever we were going. He was one of a kind. Missing him is a pain unlike any that I have ever experienced. That's because loving him and having him as my dad, is my best friend and my role model, was a love unlike any that I have ever had. So I am thankful to God even for this, as part of the beautiful gift that God gave me and Dad. Dad wasn't afraid to die, and he lived every day of his life in such a way that he needn't have been. After he died, as I was going through all his writings, I found a little something that he had written for us to find when he died. In his final paragraph, he wrote, "The road ahead is not so long now. Who will miss me when I'm gone? Was I good to them? Did I matter? These questions I cannot answer." Now, I interrupt Dad's flow here just to say, look around. Thank you all for being here to be the answer to his question. And thank you especially to Shuli. What a wonderful surprise. What a wonderful nurse. Thank you to you because your presence answers what Dad could not for himself. With a broken and a grateful heart, I conclude as he did. But I am okay. Don't be sad for me. Be glad for me. I am thankful above all. I am thankful. And over all these things put on love, that is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of Christ control your hearts, the peace into which you were called in one body. And be thankful.
I'm going to try to get through this without sobbing again. I've heard so much about what Bob has done in the community and with all the people he has interacted with. I want to speak to another part of his ministry. And I want to bear witness. I want to bear witness to what he meant to me. A number of years ago, I was sitting in the back of the Asheville Quaker Meeting House. I just come back from another 12-hour drive to Chicago, where I was in the middle of a 4-year custody court case. And I was in despair. I was trying to protect my son. I couldn't afford to both have an attorney and to support my son. I chose to support my son and go to court myself, driving back and forth. And I think their strategy was to just torment me for as long as possible, try to provoke me. And I was sitting there in the back of the Quaker meeting in complete, exhausted despair. And I was struggling with what does God want me to do? What do I need to do? Do I need to fight? And then Bob stood up. And often in Quaker meeting, my mind wanders. But whenever Bob stood up to speak, I completely went silent. And I was ready to listen because, as you all know, when Bob spoke, you heard the words of God. And Bob was studying some kids had confronted one of his sons and had said things, and his son was in pain. And of course, right there, I'm listening. And Bob said, every instinct in him wanted to confront those guys who had hurt his son, and he wanted to respond in righteous anger. And he said he studied on it. And those boys wouldn't have seen a father defending his son in righteous anger. They would have seen a crazy, angry black man. And that anger would just multiply out into the world. They would respond to that anger back to him, back to other people. And that's the way anger and hatred multiplies through the world. And Bob said, And it still resonates with me just about every day. He said, I can't tell my son what to do, but for me, I'm going to let the evil end with me. I'm going to let the evil end with me. And that was the words of God that I needed to hear in that moment. And he said, because it works the other way too. You can maybe not be able to respond to the people who hurt your son with love, but you can respond to someone else with love, and you can give a random smile. You could laugh with someone. You can tell an inclusive little joke. You can reach out in love, and you can listen in the way Bob had with just, he's seeing you when he spoke to you. He saw you, and he listened to you. And that multiplies out too. That ripples out into the world. And that's that love, if someone takes it from them, just a little smile that brightens up their day, and they pass the smile on to someone else. Maybe instead of going home angry and not paying attention to their kids, they go home and they give the kids a hug, and they tell them that they love them. And that's the path of God. It's so easy, so simple to respond to anger with anger, to hatred with hatred. There's a paved highway filled with people in this world, and that's the natural human way to respond. But that's not what Bob did. Bob responded with love. He took the trail through the woods, and that is so heroic, to let the evil end with you, to let the evil end with me, to take the pain and the agony and your ego and all of that and not send it back out into the world, but give it to God. And take the time that you need to go out and spread the love. And I used to study, how is it that I could be so concerned about my son, and so that is my issue? And what Bob spoke about addressed that directly, yet somebody on the other side of the Quaker meeting with a completely different issue. Bob would also speak directly to that. And I studied on that, as Bob would say, and I realized that's because every time Bob was studying on something, he was studying on how to love. And love is always the answer to all of our problems. And it's hard, and it's a struggle. And Bob was a hero. He was a sacred man, and he took that path. And every day, I hope and I pray that I can find the strength and the courage and love to follow Bob along that path. Thanks.
I know Bob. I've known Bob for a long, long time. I knew Bob not through the Community Relations Council. I'm a newbie. I moved here in 1990, so I wasn't around at the beginning, and I didn't meet Bob until Building Bridges started. When Building Bridges started, Bob, of course, was involved. It was a program, and it still is, a program that deals with race and race relations and racism and people getting to know each other and sitting in circles and for a 9-week period and sharing their feelings and thoughts about the topic of the night, which might be racism in the schools or racism in the criminal justice system or whatever. When I met Bob, I remember him teasing us. Building Bridges became very special to me. I was a participant in the first one and still show up fairly regularly to do something. especially for the potluck nights. I'm happy to be there to help set up, to help put away, and to eat a lot. Bob pointed out that Building Bridges had a logo that was very much like the Human Relations Council logo. And I thought, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. It was a black hand and a white hand clasping, shaking hands, it appeared. You may not know that Building Bridges is an all-volunteer organization. And finally, after 30 years, Building Bridges managed to find its own logo. I think, Bob, it's two squares, like discourse squares, cartoons with the arrows coming down. It just says Building Bridges. I think Bob can rest in peace, knowing that we have finally become honest and have our own logo. Bob, of course, showed up throughout the years. We sat in the pre-bridge meeting, which is the meeting of the co-facilitators, just about 9 months ago, I think. He was a co-facilitator of a small group in the fall, last fall. And he spoke fondly of his boys. He was always concerned and happy when Donna was making progress. And I'm just grateful for the gift of Bob. Thank you.
I got the courage to stand up. When I was 10 years old, I switched schools here at Asheville, and I met David and Bob and Donna, and Christopher was a baby. And my mom, we lived in the county. We lived out on the Leicester side of West Asheville. And I went to Asheville Alternative, where I still have childhood best friends, but David is one of my best friends. And my dad left town when I was 11, and he wasn't very much participating in our lives. And my mom was a single mom of 2 girls, one going to Buncombe County schools and the other Asheville City schools. And so I quickly got to know Bob and Donna, David and Christopher. And Bessie was always waiting outside for me and for David, his green car. After every Hill Street Middle School event, every Asheville Middle School event, every Asheville High School event, every football game, school dances, concerts, plays that David was in. And my mom wouldn't let us eat fast food. But David's dad, Bob, took us to Bojangles on Merriman Avenue whenever we wanted to go. And they let me spend the night there. And I felt like I was a part of Montford because I was with them all the time. They took me on vacations. And then you go into your 20s and you kind of are on a selfish path of just flying by the seat of your pants, and you kind of you're not in touch with people that also raised you. And then I had a baby in my 30s. And for whatever reason, I felt the need to come back to their family. And so my son has gotten to know Bob over the years, and he now gives him candy, which my mom also never gave us. And he was very much like a father figure when I was in my preteen and teen years. And I love you guys so much. And I'm so glad that my son also got to know him.
I'm Jerry, and I had the privilege of teaching Chris in preschool.
And a testament to Bob and Donna's parenting. He was awesome, curious, intelligent, incredible then at 4 years old. So it was an honor to teach you, Chris, and an honor to know Bob. And thank you, family, for sharing Bob with all of us. Incredible human. Thank you.
My name is Jen Rhodey Ward Landon, and I met Bob through Asheville Friends Meeting in 2007, and we are grateful for the gift of his light. We 3 weeks ago returned from 6 months in Ghana. Before we left, Bob gave us a card, which we took with us to Ghana and read weekly, and I'd like to share part of it with you. Great news about Africa. Kiss her for me. You will find out that the world is a very small place and very different. I am so proud of you and Jen and how you are raising those beautiful girls, teaching them how to love and to open every door. Your girls will grow in amazing ways. They are happy. You are happy. What else is needed?
I just want to add, I'm secretly jealous of Bessie.
I'm Judy, and I'm Donna's sister, and Bob was, of course, my brother-in-law. I always loved Bob. He was always so special. He was always shy sometimes, but respecting when we were together, or like he would often leave the room when I would stop by to visit, because I always lived somewhere else in the country. And but he respected our time together. I've never known a more selfless man, and I had the great privilege of since before Christmas, I was spending more time with Donna and Bob. Donna because of her cancer challenges, and Bob because of his many, many health issues that grew quite significant there in the end. I had the privilege of taking him to dialysis. What I've listened to today is just an example of wherever Bob went, he included everybody. He reached out to everybody. How are you? Have you gotten in any trouble recently? You know, he would always say that. Or behave yourself. Don't you get into any trouble until I see you again. But one night in particular, when I was there helping them, Bob had difficulty sleeping, and most of you did not know this, but he would often just sleep upright in a recliner because breathing became more difficult for him. And they were telling us, please get him to lie down because he's developing sores on his backside and that type of thing. And so I went with him to help him to get into bed. And he said, I just want to sit here for a little while. And I said, let's do that. So I got real comfortable in the recliner, and he's sitting on the edge of the bed. And I know we must have talked. I just let him talk for over an hour. And I asked him, and after listening to everything that everybody has said, for him to share what I'm going to share with you it's just so Bob. I said, Bob, if you could go back and change anything in your life, what would you change? Judy,
I would get rid of pride. And as I've listened to you all, that man had no pride. You know what I mean, the negative pride. And he said, and I wouldn't be as stubborn. And I'm keeping those in my heart because I want to pass his smile. His smile to me is the inward expression of his beautiful soul.
I'm Lynette. I'm Donna's sister. And I always sort of wanted an older brother. You know, a guy that kind of takes care of you or stands up for you. Bob just had your heart. He just, I don't know, I felt like I was so important when I was with Bob. He was amazing as a father, but I loved how he loved my sister. I've known a lot of men. I don't mean it bad. Let's see. Help me, Donna. Help me. Say something. That came out terrible. I don't know, should I go on? But in my life, I've met a lot of men. But the love he had for Donna, I never knew. I wanted someone to love me that way. And I wanted more than anything to be a mother. But my sisters, Judy and Donna, have given me 4 amazing nephews to love. Sarah went on the trip with us to Miami, Orlando, and I knew Chris would drive us nuts the whole way, okay? Oh, because he would go, how far is it? Where are we? What's that close to or whatever? So I bought a book on how things are made, and that kept him quiet. It was, how does an escalator work? How does this work? How does that work? Sarah and David and Chris and I shared a room. And Donna and Bob got to be alone. They didn't know what to do. Yeah, they did. Apparently they did. But it was just amazing to be with them, the love that family had. And something I always wanted. But on that vacation trip, Sarah got a bed, David got a bed, Chris got a cot, and he went, oh, Aunt Nett, please lay down here with me. I feel so secure when you're here. In the middle of the night, his feet were on my head. On this little cot, I was just like, how can that child just move around like that? It was just unreal. But I had the most amazing time. And somewhere along the way, when we were at Disney, Sarah said to David, I wish she was my Aunt Nett. Chris has a Mickey Mouse hat on, cockeyed. And he goes, you know, what is it with you, Aunt Nett? Aunt Judy comes to my school, they call her Judy. You come to my school, and they call you Aunt Nett. This is when I got the title of my life that healed those wounds of not being a mother. So, what are you? the antnet of the world. Now that will be on my tombstone. And I want people to just wonder, what does that mean? But he has no idea that healed that loneliness that I felt. And people would go, Mother would say, well, children love you. Maybe you wouldn't have loved them so much. But I wanted to be a mother. And when I was 40, I thought, I will never hear anybody call me mommy. And something about being labeled the antnet of the world healed my soul, and it's with me today. But these boys were brought up in a home where they could express themselves. Most parents sort of stifle a little bit what children may want to say or do. The three girls here, we were the daughters of a Southern Baptist minister. Hello. And it was wonderful, but it was back in a time when you didn't marry somebody black. Hello. I watched Bob, and those cards, don't ever get rid of the cards that he wrote you. My daddy was like, Irene, that was our mother, where did you put those cards? Because Bob wrote cards that would just take you to another planet, didn't he? He did, the way he expressed himself. And it was magnificent. And that Southern Baptist preacher had his heart worn over. He was never outwardly, we never heard bad words ever growing up. It was always about the love of God and all of that. But Bob spoke at my daddy's funeral. That Baptist church was packed. And he got right up there because that's what Daddy would have wanted. And you think about the barriers that we've created in this world. You hear Bob's story. A cab wouldn't pick him up. You may think people are making that up, but that's the truth, and it still somewhat exists. And I think if the one thing we could all take away from knowing Bob is to share the love with everybody. He said, give a smile. One time I drove him to dialysis, leaving, you knew he was exhausted. He looked at the man waiting. He said, how's it going? How you doing? You hanging in there? We got in the car and we proceeded to go in the wrong direction. And Bob's driving is as good as mine, which is, we should have been chauffeured. But we end up in Jupiter. Hello. We've had nothing to eat, okay? He's been through dialysis. The fireman that told me the directions said, you go so-and-so. Bob said, that is not right. So I just got on the interstate and we went further because he didn't ask much of you. But I wanted to do whatever made him happy. When we got back close to Weaverville, he said, I know I'm not supposed to have this, but how about we pull into McDonald's? And he said, I want a cheeseburger, I want some French fries, and get my sweetie some chicken tenders. What do they call them? Chick-foot. And we got to their house, and he was barely out of the car, and Donna was on the porch. He went, hey, sweetie. Hey, sweetie. Donna meeting Bob is one of the greatest things that happened to our family. I think everybody, this is my cousin from Greensboro who drove in. Bob he was amazing in his quiet way. I hope that I can be the Aunt Ned of the world that Bob would want me to be. And I know he loved me. He made you feel so loved, no matter what. My hair's too short. I got a terrible haircut, and I'm looking in the mirror, and he goes, I think it looks good. I like short hair. You knew you looked like a dog, but you know. Thanks, Bob. But he was so encouraging, so loving. And I tell you, being here today has been such a privilege. Hearing all of you talk, you know, it's like you didn't have to know him long for him to touch your heart. And I thought of, where's the lady whose little son, Ryan. I remember when he would follow other people at the, I don't know what it was called, but where he worked with the children, he would go in, the kids were everywhere. They were supposed to be in bed. Bob would go in and go, bed. They didn't say one word. They went and got in the bed. It wasn't because he was ugly. They knew that he loved them. And he would go out of his way he would almost, I think, deliberately try to work on holiday mornings. He always took McDonald's biscuits into them. You know, just such easy love. But all the struggles he went through, you never knew. Judy and I sat here in amazement hearing what Chris told us. But for Donna, she gave our family. Whew. I do believe he's one of the greatest men that ever lived. I really do. And I am just so thankful for all the stories you shared. What a blessing. Thank you so much. And thank you, Bob. Thank you for the love you gave us all.
My name is Mary Thompson, and I just wanted to say something about Donna and Bob, David and Christopher as neighbors. Bob was the kindest man I think I have known. And I remember David in Raisin in the Sun. And I still have the program. And I still have the note from Christopher when he was going around the neighborhood collecting in his little red wagon food for the Catholic Church. I still have that note. And when Aunt mentioned the cards, Bob would walk, when you all had a dog, he would walk the dog by the house. And one time he stopped, and I mentioned that my mother had died. And I think his mother had died a little bit before, and he sent a card that I have treasured, and I still have. A lot of other things have gone by the wayside, but those I treasure. And he wrote about his mother. As I said, he was the kindest man I think I've ever known. And I'm very proud to have had, I feel very fortunate to have had Donna, and Bob, David and Christopher as neighbors. and also for all the work he did in building bridges, the Asheville Buncombe Community Relations Council, for his opinion pieces in the newspaper, so thank you for all you've shared, and I just wanted to say that about and David and Christopher, you've grown into wonderful men.
My name is Tom Craig. My wife Ann and I knew Bob 30 to 40 years ago. We met him, I believe. It was in the 80s, I think. We were involved in a lot of activist activity, trying to save the world, kind of like what Bob was doing. And I don't want to compare myself to him. He was much more forthright and powerful than I was. But I never really got to know him person to person that well. We would, all smile and have an intense glance between us. And that meant a lot. And it was always something, I always felt he was like a force of nature. He just sort of moved in the background. But, oh, Bob, hi, Bob, And, but he was always present. He was present at Martin Luther King breakfasts. He was present at demonstrations for the homeless, for LGBT. You turn around, oh, Bob's here. Okay, cool. All right, that's good. And so I want to do a little cheer recognition of Bob. It is a thing that when we were involved in Central American politics, so to speak, in the 80s and 90s, the activists in those countries, when they lost one of their community, they would say, name, presente, and that meant they're here, they're present, and that's what I want to do now with Bob, because I think he's here. And so the way it works is I'm going to say, Bob Smith, and everybody else will say, presente. And we'll do that 3 times, and I hope he enjoys it. Bob Smith, presente. Bob Smith, presente. Bob Smith, presente. Thank you.
My name's Amy, and Bob will always be presente. I first met Bob when I came to Asheville, and I had a big heart, and I wanted to change the world. And you could not have ever met a better person to undergird you in that than Bob. Sugar and spice was Bob. 99 parts love and 1 part mischief. That was Bob. He always had that glint in his eye, like, what is he up to? He's up to something, and he wanted you to be up to something too. But Bob was like a river, that quiet force that was always moving, always shaping things in the right direction. One of my favorite things that Bob always said was, my people. That was his punctuation mark, was my people. And he always made everybody feel like, you're my people. And if we can't do anything else in this life, it is that we give that punctuation, my people. He loved y'all so much. Loved you so much. And yet, Bessie don't hold a candle to you, dear one. There is no way. There was a gentleman in my neighborhood when I was a little kid, and he cut grass, and we all loved him, and his name was Virgil. And my parents would try to be teaching me important things, and so they would say, Amy, patience is a virtue. Patience is a virtue. Well, I didn't know what the heck a virtue was, so I would always say, patience is a Virgil. And as I became an adult, I realized I knew who a Virgil was. And so I want to say, love is Bob. There are some things that you embody so much that whenever you walk in a room, that comes with you. And I don't know what a virtue is, but I know that love is a Bob. And I know every one of us was so loved by him. And one thing I'm leaving today with is I want to love like Bob loved. And I swear that man, if he had a staff, could part waters. Because one of the things that he wanted all of us to be was free, to love each other the way it was intended to be. He didn't live in this world like it is. He lived in this world like it is intended to be. So love is a Bob.
I moved to Asheville in 1975, August, and I pulled up at the Allen High School, by then called Allen Center, and I was to live in the emergency shelter of the Caring Place, and Bob was my colleague for all of these young people that couldn't at that moment live in their family homes. And it was through Bob's eyes that I came to know East End and Southside and Stumptown, and he would take us for our afternoon walk at right there at the church on College, and we'd look out over the mountains, and he would tell me where the mountains were. So I came to know Asheville through Bob's eyes, and I came to meet many of you through Bob. And I think about when we were all young, and how the arc of our life brings us to this moment. And I thank Bob and Donna, and I thank David, and I thank Christopher, and I thank Donna's family and Bob's family, and all of you in the Quaker community for giving us this time to remember Bob and to think of our lives and what Bob wants us to do going forward, which is to love. And Bob is a legend. Bob will always be a legend. May his name be for a blessing.
My name's Kay. Hi. So I've known the amazing Smith family for so many years. I first got to know Donna when we taught GED classes together for AB Tech. And I think that was 35 years ago, Donna. And so through Donna, I got to know Bob and David and Chris and Aunt Nett and Judy and Dee and Mo and probably a lot of other people I'm not even remembering at the moment. But one thing that always stood out to me was when I was over at the house at 193 Tacoma for Christmases and 4th of July and different holidays. It was such a house of love. It was palpable. So much love in that house. And it was Bob and it was Donna who made that happen for their family. And in my mind, I just sort of through the years have called them the amazing Smith family.
They could be, trapeze artists. Amazing people. And about 20 years ago, I think it was, I was very involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and Bob and Donna agreed to be on the bowling team. Do you remember that? Yeah. And they took time out of all their busy lives to raise money for the team, and I'll just call it a motley crew team in terms of bowling abilities. But we had fun, we raised money, so that was great. But Bob was one of a kind, very authentic, and as other people have said, very wise, and always with a little twinkle in his eye. And I do feel his presence here. So,
people around you as you are comfortable to do so. And stay with us to continue celebrating.